Anna rushed out of the house, her trembling hands clutching tightly at her thin coat. The cold wind howled across the fields, but nothing could stop her from running straight toward the barn. The thick darkness blanketed everything around her with only the faint glow of the lantern hanging outside the barn, casting light like a distant beacon calling her closer. She halted in front of the heavy wooden door, her heart pounding so violently. It felt as if it would burst from her chest inside. The soft but deliberate sound of hooves shuffling echoed as if the horse was waiting for her, or perhaps already knew she was coming. Anna pushed the door open, the creak of the hinges slicing through the suffocating. Silent Stellan stood there, tall and majestic, his deep black eyes staring directly at her. She swallowed hard, taking slow, deliberate steps toward the horse. The air in the barn felt heavy, as if every breath and every movement carried a significance she couldn't quite explain. "You were waiting for me, weren't you?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper, soft like a confession. Stellan tilted his head, slightly, a small gesture that felt like an answer. There was something in his gaze, a profound understanding, a wordless whisper that held Anna frozen in place, unable to look away. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen, truly heard in a way she never had. With Lucas, a powerful surge of emotion slid through her, both comforting and perilous. She reached out her hand, brushing against Stell's man, feeling the warmth of his body seep into her fingertips. It was like an electric current running down her spine. And in that moment, she realized her life had irreversibly changed outside. The wind continued to howl, but Anna no longer noticed. Everything else around her faded into silence. There was only her Stellan and a burgeoning secret threading its way through the shadows like a flame poised to ignite. Anna stood still in the barn, her hand resting gently on Stell's man, her gaze lost in the distant void. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, filling her lungs with the scent of dry hay, damp earth, and the warm breath of the horse standing silently beside her. In this tranquil space, she felt as though she had escaped it all: the cold, lifeless house, Lucas's vacant stares, and the goring loneliness that had eaten away at her soul for years. Memories rushed over her like a tidal wave. There had been a time when Anna believed love could conquer. Everything. She and Lucas were once like blazing flames, unstoppable and inseparable. She remembered the first time they met, how Lucas had made her laugh until tears streamed down her face. With his wit and natural charms, he recalled the long evenings spent by the fire, sharing dreams of a bright future. Back then, Lucas had promised he would always be by her side, building a life together that they could both cherish. But those promises had become a luxury. As the years passed, Lucas had thrown himself into his work, endless meetings and business trips that stretched so long Anna could no longer remember the last time they had dinner together without his phone buzzing incessantly every time he came home. It was like hosting a stranger. He'd walk in, drop his bag, give her a quick hug, and disappear behind the screen of his laptop. Anna had really tried to hold on. She had prepared romantic dinners, tried to revive their old conversations, but Lucas always dismissed her with the same weary refrain. "I'm too tired. Anna, can we talk later?" But later never came. She used to believe that time could heal everything, but instead it only widened the chasm. Between them, Lucas wasn't a bad man. He wasn't unfaithful, angry, or neglectful in the conventional sense, but his indifference had made Anna feel like she was slowly fading, becoming a ghost in her own marriage. When Lucas bought Stellan, she thought it was just another fleeting interest of his, but Stellan had become the only bright spot in Anna's otherwise monotonous days. In the horse's deep, soulful eyes, she found a peace she hadn't felt in years. But it wasn't just that Anna couldn't forget the first time she met Evelyn, the horse trainer Lucas had hired. Evelyn was a formidable woman, with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through every facade, and an air of quiet sorrow that hinted at her own wounds. Evelyn didn't speak much, but when she did, her words hit like arrows straight to truths Anna had long avoided. She remembered that afternoon, when she and Evelyn stood outside the barn talking about Stellan. Evelyn had looked, directly at her. Her gaze as though peeling back every layer of Anna's soul, and said a sentence. Anna would never forget, you know. Horses like Stellan can sense what humans refuse to admit. Sometimes it's loneliness that forges the strongest bond. At the time, Anna had only smiled, politely, and brushed it off. But now, as she stood before Stellan, Evelyn's words echoed in her mind like a prophecy. She didn't want to acknowledge it, but perhaps Evelyn had been right. It was her loneliness, the emptiness. Lucas couldn't F that had slowly drawn her closer. To Stellan, step by step, she ran her hand. Softly through Stell's man, feeling the warmth beneath her. Palm, you know? Stellan, she whispered sometimes. I wish I could be a horse like you. No worries. No battles to fight. Just freedom. Stellan didn't answer, of course, but his gaze seemed to say he understood. And in that moment, Anna felt a fleeting sense of relief. Yet deep down she knew. Everything was changing, and there was no way to turn back. The moonlight stretched across the fields, illuminating the narrow path leading to the barn. Anna walked slowly, step by step, as though an invisible force was pulling her towards. Stellan, the wind grew stronger, colder, but she didn't care. Something inside her was stirring a tempest, both vague and overwhelming, as if her heart was urging her towards something her mind couldn't comprehend. The barn door creaked open, the hinges groaning into the stillness of the night. Stellan stood there, his deep, shadowy eyes reflecting the moonlight in that moment. Anna felt the world around her dissolve. Lucas was gone, the cold, distant phone calls, and the lonely, endless evenings had vanished. There was only her and Stellan as thaw. They belonged to each other in a way that required no explanation. You were waiting for me. Again, weren't you? She whispered, her own voice sounding like a stolen secret. She stepped closer, her hand brushing gently against Stell's sleek black mane. The horse's warm breath puffed softly against her, soothing and silent like a quiet reassurance. She stroked him, letting her fingers glide over the smooth strands of his coat. The weight in her chest seemed to lift, replaced by a calm surrender. It almost felt foreign, but then the moment shifted. Anna couldn't recall what made her do it. Perhaps it was the way Stell's eyes held hers, or the slight tilt of his head that seemed to acknowledge her. Touch, perhaps it was the storm inside. Her, the loneliness, the yearning, and the hollow void she had been unable to fill. Her hand stopped on the side of his face, her palm pressed gently against his. Warmth. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. But even that breath trembled. Stellan, his name slipped from her lips, not as a call, but as a confession. The horse shifted slightly, lowering his head as if in response. The way he stood motionless, yet full of understanding, made Anna feel as though he could read the very thoughts swirling in her mind. His gaze met her deep and judged and demanding, nothing yet so magnetic. She couldn't look away. Her breathing grew heavier. She moved closer, as though the space between them was an unbearable chasm that needed to be bridged. A long moment stretched between them, silent but thick with anticipation. Her hand came to rest on Stell's chest, feeling the steady, powerful rhythm of his heart beneath her fingers, but her own heart was a chaotic drum. Beat threatening to shatter her composure. She stopped thinking for the first time in her life. All reason, all notions of morality, and every voice of logic were silenced. She was left only with the rawness of her emotions, or perhaps a part of her she had repressed for far too long. One small step, a slight lean forward, and Anna's world came crashing down. She was no longer herself. She was no longer the tired, hollow version of Anna she had been. She was simply a woman, consumed by feelings she had never known before. But then a faint noise broke the spell. Anna jerked back as if she had been yanked out of a fevered dream. A dim beam of light sliced through the barn, and her heart stopped in that instant. Evelyn stood in the doorway, the sharp-eyed horse trainer's gaze fixed on Anna like a dagger. She didn't say a word, but Anna knew Evelyn had seen. Everything the air in the barn felt. Frozen. Evelyn didn't move her expression, a mix of surprise and cold calculation as though she was piecing together the scene. She had just walked in on Anna, opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She could feel her breath rising in the cold night air, like an unspoken confession. Shame, guilt, and fear pressed down on her chest. Yet somewhere, deep inside, she felt an odd sense of relief that finally her secret was no longer hers alone. To bear Anna. Evelyn's voice broke the silence, calm but firm. What do you think? You're doing the simple question cut through the air like a knife. Evelyn stepped into the barn, her movements slow but purposeful. Anna stumbled back, but Stellan stood unmoving like an anchor holding her in the eye of the storm. I don't know. Anna stammered, her voice weak and trembling. Evelyn stopped just a few feet from her, her sharp gaze boring into Anna's very soul. Do you understand where this is heading? Evelyn asked, her voice low, but each word landing like a blow. You're playing with fire, Anna, and once it burns, there will be nothing left. To salvage, Anna couldn't respond. She simply stood there face to face with Evelyn and the maelstrom of emotions tearing through her. She knew Evelyn was right. She knew the truth in those words, but even knowing that she couldn't stop. Not now, not when she had already crossed a line. She once thought she never would. Evelyn stood firmly before Anna, her gaze sharp as a blade. The suffocating tension in the barn thickened, pressing down on Anne, until she felt like she couldn't breathe. She couldn't avoid Evelyn's eyes, couldn't deny what had just happened, and couldn't muster any excuse that might justify her actions. Did you really think this would stay a secret? Anna. Evelyn's voice was steady, yet brimming with restrained anger. Did you think no one would notice the change in you, the difference in your eyes, every time you walk out of this barn? Anna took a step back, her hand clutching Stell's man as if it were the only thing keeping her from falling. Apart, but Stellan, the horse she had once believed understood her better than, and one now stood silent. No movement, no sound, just a presence watching everything. From an unreachable distance, I didn't mean to. Anna croaked, her voice hoarse. She knew her words carried no weight. She couldn't deny what Evelyn had seen, but she also couldn't articulate what she felt. This overpowering emotion sweeping her away, like a whirlwind. She couldn't resist, didn't mean to. Evelyn let out a short, sharp laugh tinged with bitter irony. Anna, this isn't something that just happened. This is a choice, and, you know, exactly what you're doing. Evelyn's words struck Anna like a blow to the chest. But instead of regrets, she felt herself being pushed to the edge of a precipice. The storm inside her, shame, anger, and even a desperate longings, swelled, threatening to break free. Why do you care? Anna snapped, her voice louder than she intended, almost a shout. This is my life. You have no idea what I've been through. You don't know how lonely I am. Evelyn's expression didn't waver. You're right. I don't know everything. Evelyn replied, her tone quiet, but heavy with meaning. But I do know. This you're destroying yourself. And not just yourself, everyone around you. Anna felt exposed, stripped bare. She stood, there lost between Evelyn's cold, piercing gaze and the haunting silence of Stellan. Every justification, every excuse she had told herself now, felt meaningless. She was just a woman trapped, consumed by feelings she couldn't control. Lucas will never understand, Anna said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She turned her face away, her eyes catching the moonlight streaming through the cracks in the barn wall. He's never understood me, not really, and that's why you're doing this. Evelyn stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking to just a few steps. Anna, I'm not here to judge you, but you need to understand what you're doing won't bring you the freedom you think it will. It'll only make things worse. Anna wanted to argue, to yell that Evelyn didn't understand. But how could she deny the truth in Evelyn's words? How could she ignore the reality that she'd crossed a line she could never uncross? A sudden noise. Noise broke, through the tension cutting through the silence like a blade. Anna froze, her head snapping toward the sound. The beam of Akar's headlights swept across the field, slicing through the darkness. Like Arizor Lucas, her heart seized, and she felt herself go cold, rooted in place. Evelyn glanced at Anna, her sharp gaze softening, just slightly, a glimmer of strange sympathy flickering in her eyes. "You need to decide," Evelyn said, her voice quieter now, but no less resolute right now. Either face what you've done or sink deeper into this mess. Anna's breathing quickened as Lucas's car drew closer, the headlights sweeping across the barn wall and illuminating her pale, stricken face. She had no idea what she would say or do. She only knew that every secret, every feeling she had buried was now teetering on the brink of exposure. Anna Evelyn said one last time, her voice firm and unwavering. "This is your moment to choose, and only you can make that choice." Anna looked at Evelyn, then at Stellan, and finally back toward the approaching headlights. Her mind was a chaotic storm, but her heart pounded with a clarity that defied everything else, as if it were trying to guide her in that moment. She realized she had nowhere left to run. The headlights cut sharply through the darkness, illuminating the barn door and etching every detail of Anna's anxious face into stark clarity. She stood motionless, as if time itself had stopped. Evelyn took a step back, leaving space for Anna, though she didn't leave. Evelyn's sharp eyes, usually cold and unyielding, now held a quiet, watchful patience, as though she was waiting for Anna to make her final decision. The car came to a stop just outside the barn. Lucas stepped out, his tall friend came casting a long shadow under the harsh glow of the headlights. The car door slammed shut with a dry thud, and silence reclaimed the air. He hesitated, scanning the area briefly, before moving toward the barn. "Anna, are you in there?" Lucas called, his voice calm, just as it always was. But oh, Anna. It sounded like thunder crashing in the still night. She turned toward him, their eyes meeting, and in an instant she realized he knew something. Maybe it wasn't clear. Maybe it was only an instinctive feeling, but he knew. "I couldn't sleep," she said, her voice steadying as best as she could, managed though the tremor in her breath betrayed her. "I just wanted to check on Stellan." Lucas stepped into the barn, his eyes moving from Anna to Evelyn, who stood a few steps away, silent and still, like a shadow, his brows furrowed slightly, his gaze shifting between the two women, Pi picking up on the unspoken tension that hung heavy in the cramped space. "Is something going on?" he asked, his tone inquisitive, his eyes probing. Evelyn didn't answer. Anna knew she wouldn't. This was her moment to face the truth. To take responsibility for everything she had tried so desperately to bury. All eyes were on her now, and she felt as though every path had narrowed into a single point. She could lie again, prolong the suffocating burden of secrets and guilt, or she could confront it all, the shame, the pain, and the vulnerability she had been so afraid to face. Her gaze flickered to Evelyn, whose expression, though calm, carried an unyielding challenge. Then to Lucas, whose eyes, though filled with worry, carried a glimmer of doubt she couldn't ignore. She knew she couldn't keep running. "Lucas," she began, her voice thick with emotion, "need to tell you something." Lucas froze, his eyes narrowing slightly in confusion. He didn't interrupt, didn't move, his gaze locked on hers. Evelyn turned her face slightly, stepping away as if to grant them privacy. Though she didn't leave the barn. Anna took a deep breath, every word she wanted to say tangling in her throat. She thought of the moments she had lost, herself, the times she had looked into Stell's eyes and found the solace Elle had never been able to give her. She thought of the yearning, the shame, the desperation, and she knew that if she didn't speak now, those feelings would imprison her forever. I felt so alone. "Lucas," she said, her voice, horror as tears began streaming down her cheeks. I felt it for so long, and I don't know how to escape it. Everything with you, everything between us, it feels like it's lost all.